Welcome to the Dylan Experience. Today is episode 56, and I've got another special guest for you today. But before we get to that, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you need to do to stay in touch with the podcast. My guest today is the host and producer of the podcast, One More Thing Before You Go, a podcast I've had the honor of being a guest on, which is a great experience. He's an author, a keynote speaker, a screenwriter, director, and a retired police sergeant. He holds a master's in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on performance and digital media, and a bachelor's in business management. He's a husband, a father, an animal advocate, and a vegan who has managed his disease with a naturopathic way of life. My guest today is Michael Herst. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Dylan. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I had to have you on the show because just the discussion we had on your podcast, which is already out, and I can link in the description below, was just awesome. I think it was just a great conversation between two people that I think really understand each other, at least in some part, even though I imagine that we have some differences. And I'm really curious to kind of learn a little bit more about you. Obviously, you know a lot about me at this point, but I would love to learn your story. I'd love to hear what you've been through, how you've gone through it. So if you want to start with just telling me about your life, telling me about where you came from and how you've gotten to this point in your life, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to share the story. And yes, we did have a great conversation on my podcast, and it was an honor to have you on there as well. I need to say that first and foremost. As you said, my name is Michael Herst, and I grew up in Colorado, and I was a Colorado boy for many years. We won't say how old I am, but you probably can allude to the gray hair that's poking out. While I was there, I now reside in Phoenix, Arizona area, and we moved down here for a particular reason, which I'm about to get to. I was a police officer back there, and had a very lucrative career. Shouldn't say lucrative. Lucrative if you count catching bad guys.
Yeah.
That would be lucrative. But I had a very enthusiastic career. I loved being a police officer. I loved my job. I loved what I did. I loved the interaction with people from all over the world. I worked in the Colorado Springs area, and that's a tourist area. If you're familiar with it, it's got like the Air Force Academy, Cape of the Winds, Pikes Peak, in your cliff dwellings, you name it, it's got it in the form of, people coming from all over the world to visit there. So I got to interact with people from all over the world, and I love that portion of it. I'm a father, as we said. I've got two wonderful daughters. Both of them live in California now. One of them works in the entertainment industry, and one of them works in the digital media industry and the marketing industry, and very proud of both of them. And they were an integral part of my journey in healing from what had taken place in my life, along with my wife. I've been married for this year will be 34 years. And everything that the ups and downs, the surgeries, the injury, the disease, and everything that's come through, I absolutely 100% value my wife and my children in helping me come through to where I'm at today. And that's kind of a start.
Tell me more about how you went from being a police sergeant into, I imagine that you became an author, you became a keynote speaker, screenwriter, director. Like, that side of this story, I haven't really heard anything about, and I'm really curious about that. Where did that stuff kind of come in? Was that before police, after police, during police? What happened there?
Well, I've always been interested in screenwriting, and while I was a police officer, I had written some screenplays, and a couple of them were produced, and I enjoyed that. That was my outlet. Because the job is very stressful, as you would imagine, just like being a soldier.
Yeah.
Job is very stressful, and some people take a different outlet. My outlet was writing, and it allowed me to kind of express, release some of the tension, and the disappointment, the anger, everything, depression, everything that goes along with that job. It allowed me to do that. So I'd always been interested in that, and that's where I became an author and a screenwriter. And I dabbled in independent filmmaking at that time also, and actually had produced and directed an independent film myself, and had been part of several other individuals from in the Colorado Springs area who had made independent film as well. So it was kind of a fun thing to do. And that's how I kind of got involved in that aspect of it in writing. What launched and reinvented me into who I am today and where we've come to the podcast is I was injured in line of duty in 1998. And I was pinned between a suspect's car and my patrol vehicle as he tried to escape. And those injuries subsequently, I developed rheumatoid arthritis severe. And along with those injuries, I was diagnosed to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And it forced me to retire. I was a sergeant, as you had said, and my colleagues, there are people that worked under me, beside me, and above me that continued to move forward in their career. They became sergeants and captains, lieutenants, commanders, assistant chiefs, sheriffs. Those are people I'd work with, and I was kind of waylaid. Yeah. So it forced me to reevaluate my life because, and I'm going to be honest with you, I went through anger, depression. I was forced to reevaluate my life and where I was at that time because, raising two daughters, I couldn't be the father that I really should have been and wanted to be because of the injuries and the disease that was rapidly starting to accelerate. And, I created a long, in my opinion, it was a long time period, but yeah. It created a long recovery period mentally as well as physically. To go from, and if I get emotional here, it still affects me, but, to go from being a sergeant that had a team of 13 individuals, a supervisor, somebody that people looked up to, and a police officer that, when everybody else is running away from, you're running into situation, to having my wife have to walk me to the bathroom was very humbling and depressing and so forth. So we moved here to Arizona because we found surgeons down here that when we approached them, because the ones in Colorado Springs, not mentioning any names, but, basically they said, 5 doctors, you'll be in a wheelchair. That was the diagnosis from 5. So when just one, it was 5. And I didn't want to accept that answer. So I sought out other alternatives to kind of move forward. As we all say, we as warriors always say, you never say die, right? Yep. You never give up. You always move forward. You adapt and you overcome. You push down a lot of stuff, but you also force yourself to overcome a lot of stuff. And I chose to not have those diagnoses turn me into something that I didn't want to be. So we found some surgeons down here in Arizona. And as of this date, if you include my eye surgery, which is part of the disease, I've been through 8 operations and a lot of rehab, a lot of physical therapy, a lot of, again, anger, depression, pain, and having to overcome and manage that along with my families and so forth to get out of the wheelchair. And my oldest daughter, I love my family, as I said earlier, equally, but my oldest daughter's motivation was the final motivation to kick me in the butt, to get me out of the wheelchair and I think we talked about this at the end of my podcast. I got to a point because I've had 2 knee replacements, a hip replacement, 2 shoulder replacements with implements I'm the only person in the world up until 6 months ago that had them in his shoulders to kind of rebuild me from the inside out, which was I'm very, very grateful for. But, my daughter was getting married and I said, what do you want for a present? And She looked me square in the eye.
Yeah.
She said, I want you to walk me down the aisle. So that was my motivation. And I made it a point to work my way out of that wheelchair. I put myself through those operations, learning how to rewalk, learning how to build strength, learning how to gain balance, learning how to kind of put my physical and my mental health back on track from that. And yes, I walked her down the aisle, and the wheelchair is now sitting in the garage collecting dust as a reminder of that, because no disrespect for anybody in one. I spent 4 years in one. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. You do have the opportunity to overcome. You do have the opportunity to move forward. You know, I emphasize 5 doctors told me I wouldn't. And I walk 2, 3, 4 miles a day now. So that's kind of where I've ended up now. Well, that in itself, I had kind of had to reevaluate. So what do I do now? I was a cop, and I was a cop for 16 years. I went to school to be a cop. Originally, I've got degrees in criminal justice that I didn't mention in the bio, but I have degrees in criminal justice. That was my career. That's what I wanted to do. So now that I was able to fix myself and kind of get my mental health back on track, I get my physical health back on track, I needed to kind of figure out a way and what to do to reinvent my life at 50 years old. And, it was a kind of a hard reality at that point, because if you try to go back to work at 50 years old, people say, but you're 50.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to, but they'll still look at you like you're an old guy, right? So that's where the podcast came in. My oldest daughter again stepped in and said, you love to talk and you love to have conversations. So I'm going to introduce you to podcasting. And I kind of went, yeah, I kind of like this. Started listening to podcasts, listened to more podcasts, and said, I think I can do this. So I kind of took that as a guide. And once again, I'm grateful to my oldest daughter for giving me new motivation, new inspiration, and helping me to reinvent myself into being an international podcast host. And from that, it allowed me to develop my skills and become a keynote speaker in regard to podcasting with a purpose, because I was able to share my reevaluation of my life to give it new purpose and to let people understand that even if you have obstacles in your place, you can overcome depression, you can overcome the anger, you can overcome physical limitations. You still have the opportunity to do that, and you still have purpose in this life, and that you just have to stop, take a breath, and realize that you're here for a reason, and that your purpose may get changed along your life journey. But sometimes when it gets changed along your life journey, it's for the better.
I'm always astounded by, even though I feel like I knew some of that story, and I even knew, the emotional part of it. I mean, I still felt it in so many ways. And there's so much relatability between our stories, because I certainly didn't go through an event like yours, but I've felt that feeling of being physically unable. I tore my ACL 3 times, had 2 ACL reconstructions. So I know what it feels like to all of a sudden have this complete disconnect from physical ability, and to wonder if I'm ever going to be able, for me, it was, am I ever going to be able to keep going with the military or not? And I was lucky enough to, also have that tenacity that you have to, drive yourself forward into the unknown. Well, even if I don't know it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. And that, sometimes I wonder if that's not something that can be taught, right? I wonder if that is something that innately enables us as humans to drive on beyond the adversity. You know, if you, it's something that you have to connect with on your own free will, and no one can teach you how to do that. I don't know, but it feels so relatable. You know, that takes me back to 2015 and 2014 and 2013 when I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do here, you know, and to step into all of that. And here I am now, you know, and here you are now. And, you know, I think what that really does is I think that really matures you in a way that is very, well, obviously humbling, but it's very different than what a lot of people go through, because we as warriors, right, stepped into a point where we couldn't be the physical warriors that we used to be. And we had to sharpen our mind like other people sharpen their bodies, right? You know, we had to start using our brains as our tools rather than our bodies. And I think when you do that, you become dangerous. Like you become really dangerous. Like, you know how to operate, you know how to, you know, certainly it takes so much work, it takes so much effort, but it's so remarkably beneficial to go through a situation like that, where it forces you to start thinking. Because I, you know, as I was a young man for, you know, my first few years of adulthood, I didn't know how to think very well. And, you know, taking those blows that I took forced me to, you know, carry the book instead of the sword.
Yeah, it's really, I agree with that 100%. I think that you really, that's a profound statement that you just made. It realistically, we as warriors have a certain mentality. It takes a certain mentality to be a soldier.
Yeah.
It takes a certain mentality to be a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, an EMT, a paramedic, a nurse. It takes a certain mentality. That's the reason we are in those positions. And not everybody will follow through with those. So I think that I agree with you with the fact that it may not be taught. I think that innately within ourselves, because of the profession that we had chosen and because of the type of people that we are in our environment and how we grew up. You know, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, so I had to learn to take care of myself. I had to learn to push through. I had to learn to push past. From that perspective, that a life experience taught me that. And, you know, you get to the certain point where, like you said, you know, when my wife and I walked out of the FPPA hearing, the fire, police, and pension hearing, because they have to go through a hearing and they have to determine whether or not you're going to be retired with a disability or you can go back to work. And that still affects me even 20 years later. It devastated me. On the way home, I was stunned. I live in Colorado Springs, as we said, we live in Colorado Springs area. The hearing was in Denver. And at that time, we actually lived up in Woodland Park is where we lived, which was 17 miles west of Colorado Springs. So, you know, it was a 2-hour drive home. So I had 2 hours to think about that decision that you're never going to be a cop again. You know, here's your life has now profoundly changed from being who you were and what you were, because being a cop, being a soldier, as you know, that's who we are. It's not just a job, it's who we are. That was my identity. That was your identity. Yeah. When that's suddenly taken away from us, we have to reevaluate in our own lives how we're going to move forward with that. You compound that with an injury, physical or mental, PTSD. It forces us to reevaluate our purpose and why we're here, what we're here for, and where do we go from here. And what you said, I agree with. We, within our own minds, we already know that we have to adapt and overcome, adapt and overcome, adapt and overcome. It's always, it's ingrained in us as warriors to adapt and overcome. You can't, I got my finger broken while I was arresting a guy for car theft. He was fighting us. He broke my finger. I couldn't stop and go, ow. Okay, pause, time out.
Yeah.
You have to push forward past that. You know, I still had to arrest the guy, still had to take him down and book the guy after I did everything that I had to do and taped my fingers together that were swollen that I couldn't even bend them. After I got him booked, then I was able to go to the hospital. You know, that kind of a thing. Same thing with the car. When I got hit by that car, we got him caught. I say we because obviously they caught him down the road a couple of miles, because the front end of his car was damaged so bad. In my major injury, you know, we got him caught, they got him hooked, they got him to the police department. Then I was taken care of. You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those things. Then you have to stop and breathe.
Right.
Part of my journey, and I the pause is because I really have to. I have to reflect because I think we, and anyone going through any of this, whether it be physical or emotional, especially warriors that have gone through this in any form, we're so used to being the go-to person, the leader, the individual everybody comes to, not the person asking for help. And sometimes, and I'm sure you've done the same thing. Somebody offers you help and you go, no, I can do it. And they offer again, and you say, no, I can do it. Even if it almost kills us, it is, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And the mentality to have to push through, I think, comes from survival. Like you said earlier, it's deep within our DNA to say, do I choose to survive? Do I choose to stand up and walk? Do I choose to get out of a wheelchair? Do I choose to move forward? Do I choose to help myself, to help others? Or do I just sit back and let it consume me? And I think that we have to recognize and acknowledge that we have to make a choice.
It's a hard choice. It's an incredibly hard choice sometimes. And I think, you know, I've always contemplated like that idea, and how do people really dig into that idea? You know, I know how I did it, and I'm hearing and understanding how you've done it. But in many ways, by the time we got to that choice, we had a lot of preparation, right? And not everybody does. Not everybody has the preparation that we have. You know, like I think the warrior, I hate to say class, but I think it's a good way to kind of lump everybody into a perspective or mindset where, you know, you just have this will to fight for what's right. I think that's how I would explain. There's obviously different kinds of warriors, but we all fight for our own reasons, but many people fight because they want to protect what's theirs and what's right and what's, you know, what they respect and what they honor. And when you practice that, right, as we both have, you had, you know, an illustrious career, and so have I. You learn all the tricks, right? You learn how to continue fighting, continue pushing, continue, you know, going beyond your limits, and that's very much what our careers have done for us. But then, how do people that haven't had that do it, right? What do those people that have not had that practice, or have not been forced to go through those things, how do they operate in those situations? That's always what has made me curious, you know, and in so many ways has set me in the direction of trying to find out, trying to learn more about how people do it, how to help them more specifically. Yeah, you talk about help. One of the, I think, most important skills I've had to learn in what I do now is saying no, is saying, you know what, it's not necessarily about me surviving now. I'm in a good place. And to stay in a good place, I have to be willing to say, I can't sacrifice myself for you. I have to be able to, you know, hold to myself. And also the reason I'm doing that is not necessarily just for me, although it is. There's a part of it where I have to be selfish, but there's people, that live in this home with me that I very much care about. There's there's family in my life that I very much appreciate. There's good people in my life that I very much appreciate that need me to be good with me, right? And so it's hard in, I think, any profession that helps people, supports people, guides people, advises people, to step into this idea that you have to remain somewhat selfish, right? That this idea of selflessness can almost become toxic if you're not careful with it. That's not to say it's not a good thing. It's just, it can be a remarkably bad thing for you, and that doesn't mean it's not a good thing for others. It just means it can be a very bad thing for you. And what does that mean for others? It means that others don't have you for a long period of time, right? I've set myself up to be here for a long time. I haven't, in 2012, I was very much in a position where I was not setting myself up to be here for a long time. And what I've learned from that is by stopping myself from committing suicide, because all I did was what you talked about, is helped everybody else, even if I knew I shouldn't, right? Even if I knew it was, deliberately going against my comfort level, my health, my mental health, didn't matter. I would have done it, right? And I never would have asked for help. But now I recognize that it's so fundamentally important to be able to be consistent, to be able to be here for as long as you can, because that's really how you help the most people.
Yeah.
That's an unfortunate reality, because it means that some people that require help now might not get it from you. They might have to go elsewhere. And that's a difficult discussion sometimes, because how do you say that to people? And then it kind of becomes that, that response of, well, you don't care about me. And that's just not the truth. It's just, it's not that I don't care about you, is that I have to pay attention to how I am first. And then if I have enough in the cup that it's overflowing, I can give that to you. But I got to take care of me first for other people.
I agree with that. It's when you look around and my podcast, as you know, my podcast, I talk to people who have overcome immense tragedy to triumph over their lives, and have gone through similar situations as you and I, that weren't necessarily a warrior, that those individuals were just victims of traumatic incidents, or victims of sexual assault, molestation, from childhood and
Yep.
so forth. The lessons that I think I picked up throughout my podcasting career over the last couple of years kind of emphasizes that a little bit. We as individuals that have gone through it, before we help other people that have gone through it, because we do have something to offer to them. We do have something we can offer from experience, from what we've, this is how I did it. This is what worked for me. This is how I walked out of a wheelchair. This is how my first knee surgery, I was supposed to stay on a cane. I wasn't even supposed to go on a cane for 4 weeks. I was on a cane in a week, kind of a thing. And the physical therapist is going, wow,
He's also like, God damn it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, you can do that, but have somebody grab you here, would you? And they're going, you really shouldn't do that. And I said, well, come back next week. We'll see if I'm still doing it. So the journey that we have gone through can benefit others. The journey that we have taken can benefit others, of how we did it, what we did, the perseverance, the fortitude, the strength, the compassion, the humanity, allowing some of that to come in from other individuals. But at the same time, like you said, we have to learn to practice that. I'm in the same boat as you, Dylan. I would not say no.
Yeah.
Somebody would need something, I'd say yes. No matter what, I would say yes and yes and yes. And I had to learn the same way you did, that we can only fill our cup up so much. We can only part ourselves out, so to speak, to other individuals so much, because our first priority is us. Because if we're not in full capacity, we're not mentally fit, we're not physically fit to the point that we can be,
Mm-hmm.
then we can't help other people properly anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a situation that if we're not, it would be hypocritical for me to come to you and say, get your shit together, if I don't have mine together.
Yeah.
Yet completely. So from that perspective,
that's a really profound statement right there.
Excuse me. It's we have to take care of ourselves first, and it took me a long time, just like you come to realize. It took me a long time to really come to that realization that I don't have to take care of the world. I don't have to take care of everybody else. I'm not being selfish for that. I can direct somebody. So your question earlier is, what do we do in that situation? I've been lucky enough during my podcasting career and my career through this medical journeys, because 8 operations, I learned a lot through 8 operations. And these are the only operation that wasn't major was my cataract surgery on my left eye. Mm-hmm. Everything else was major surgery. Reality is I've learned a lot through those surgeries in regard to what's the best way to help myself, and in addition to help others, because those individuals that were helping me to recover recognized that I still had within myself the innate responsibility in my mind and my soul to help other people. So they recognized that, and that's who told me what I just told you, is that get your shit together first before you give somebody advice on how to get theirs done, and have the resources available. So if somebody reaches out and say, hey, I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm having trouble with this, say, look, I can't help you right now, but here's a resource for you. Check this out.
I think what's so important in that is understanding how important it is to communicate. And I'm not just saying like how, like communicating resources. I'm talking about like how does it feel? How does your communication feel to other people, right? How do you express yourself? How do you reflect on yourself? How do you empathize with other people? When you talk to someone, how do your words come across? Because, your ability to stand up for yourself and say, I'm not in a place to support you because I'm in a place where I need support myself. Like having the words and the eloquency to explain that and share that and develop that idea and not make other people feel shameful or guilty or regretful, I think is really the foundation of remarkably good relationships. I
agree.
I think if anything I've learned here is that the people who've overcome things have a really good way of explaining it, have a really good way of sharing it, to a point of, being able to look at another person and say, it wasn't their fault. I that's what I hear so often is that, when you go through these events and you see these other people have an impact on you, if you haven't necessarily processed it, it's really hard to not blame them. But then I often see and hear so many people on this podcast specifically that come on here and look at how this person may have impacted them and say, rather than blame them, they say, this person had an impact on me, but it was something that I took in a way that wasn't necessarily good for me. And I didn't recognize that at first. I think that's really a powerful place. If there's anything that you can do to really help yourself, it's being willing to stepping into how you communicate and how you talk. Like, do you have the vocabulary you need to even have these conversations? Because more often than not, you don't. Most people don't. And I think what podcasting has really offered us, what social media has kind of offered us, is expansion of vocabulary to a level unseen before in human history. It's like we have more words, we have more understanding of what those words mean, and we have more ability to utilize words correctly, I would say.
I agree with you. And communication obviously is the key to success in anything. Communication is the key to success in relationships and in healing, in overcoming, at least from this perspective. Definitely, communication is a very key factor. Podcasting, I agree with that. It's allowed us to open a conversation and a dialogue with individuals that we can then express compassion, empathy, understanding. It teaches you patience. Everything that I've gone through, it has taught me patience. It's not I want it done and I want it done now. You have to learn that. First time I had to stand, it's like I couldn't stand, and I wanted it now. I don't want it. Well, you got a couple of weeks, you'll be able to do this. I don't want it in a couple of weeks. I want it now. Today, and in today's society, a lot of that's an instant gratification. Everybody wants an instant gratification. Again, communication is a thing that, again, compassion, understanding, empathy gives us pause to really relate more based upon listening, because I think not just talking, you need to listen.
Yeah.
And I think that listening is a skill that people are starting to lose because they don't want to listen. Either that, or they feel that they don't have to listen. So to add on what you just said, I think that those points that would be included within that: be a good listener, be a good conversationalist, understand, have some compassion, some patience, and some perseverance. And then you can help yourself and you can help others through stuff as well, whatever they're going through as well. And if you don't, and I understand what you said earlier, while you said it, in the back of my mind, I'm seeing all these scenarios where, I may have miscommunicated over the years certain aspects because of my own anger, insecurities, depression, whatever the case may be, in regard to my own healing, or they tell me something and I just didn't want to hear it. And I came to eventually understand it, eventually hear it, but I didn't have the patience to hear it.
No. I don't bring that up for no reason. I'm very much a culprit and a hypocrite of my own doing, right? I still remember when I came home from Afghanistan, and I've always been one of those people that wants other people to talk, but when it came down to me talking, I remember myself lying about things and not sharing things and denying things, like the very things that I in the moment then blamed other people for. When I ultimately brought myself to commit suicide, I found myself in a place where I literally I had built up this perception that nobody cared about me, and the falsity of that claim, like, is so ironic, because like my mom, just for the one person that was always kind of around then, my mom cared about me so much. She's always cared about me. She's always been there, and the person I learned empathy from was my mom. And this is so, it's so ironic when I look at that and realize, like, I had built that up because I wanted to, because I didn't want to listen to myself. I didn't want to recognize truth. And you talked about listening. I think the first person you should listen to is yourself, right? You should listen to how you sound, because if you would listen to yourself in a conversation, more than likely, there's a lot of people out there that would listen to themselves and say, what are you saying? Why are you saying it like that? Like, it doesn't, you don't recognize it until you really take the time to sit down and say, what did I say? Right. And then you realize, like, God, I'm an asshole sometimes, and I need to if you have any sense of, I think, healthy guilt, you start to realize you need to change that, not for everybody else, but really for yourself. If you want to build any kind of healthy relationships, it starts with how you express yourself, right?
Absolutely.
You can't blame everyone for everything, right? You can hold people accountable, but there's a big difference between holding people accountable and shaming people into feeling the guilt that you want them to feel. That's just not, that's not beneficial, right? In a relationship, it's what's beneficial in a relationship is saying, Michael, you said something earlier that bothered me, right? And I don't know what your intention was, but I need to get it off my chest because it hurt me. And I want to hear your thoughts on it, right? It's not, Michael, you are such an asshole. I think we should stop this podcast because I can't deal with you right now. Those are two very different things. You would probably take shame from the second one. You take respect from the first one, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of in my lifetime and in my career, I've had to learn to, when somebody says something to me, I've learned to kind of evaluate it, not necessarily right up front.
Sure.
I confront you immediately.
Step beyond the emotional
like,
level.
Dylan, you're an asshole. Don't, what the hell? And then sit back, and after we would shut down, I would maybe sit here and think, what the hell? And did he say? What the hell did he mean?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. But at the same time, I think an open dialogue, and I've learned this, an open dialogue is better, and say, okay, Dylan, why don't we talk about what offended you? Because maybe you heard it wrong. Maybe I said it wrong. Maybe that was not my intention. So what offended you? Right. Why did that affect you? Why did it make you angry? Can we talk about that? Because in my opinion, it's the relationship and the conversation that we're having is more important than ego.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So from what I've learned, and it has taken me a while to understand that, learn that, is that I would stop and say, hey, let's talk about this. What did I say that offended you? And what out of that, tell me why it offended you, and maybe we can talk about that, and maybe I said it wrong, or maybe that that was not my intention, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think that's more of a learned skill than anything, right? Because
I agree.
Especially, obviously, you're a cop, right? Like you're in that place where you have to learn that if you want to get past anything, right? Because you step into highly emotional circumstances and you have to figure out what is everybody's involvement in this situation. And so there's certainly a lot of practice skills there, but not everybody does that, right? Not everybody's taught that. And that's the real kicker here, is that if you're not taught that, if you're not put in situations where you practice that, if you deny conversations like I did, certainly in my youth, you start to lose out on the benefits of relationships, and you start to blame other people in the relationships for their own, for your own issues. And I think that's really my point here of trying to bring that up. It's such I just think it's so very important to dig into yourself, right? As we've already spoken, to really start the process, and develop an understanding of how do you communicate before really digging into how to communicate. How do you communicate?
Yeah, I agree.
Figure out what you can change, what you should change, and maybe what you shouldn't change.
Well, and this is kind of an adage to that. I kind of find this, I can look back on this and find it funny now. My kids and my wife say I have two voices. One is my cop voice, right? So it's like, Dylan, tell me right now. They do it now. And the other one is my dad voice, or my husband voice. So my wife or my kids will catch me on that and say, you just said that in your cop voice. Did you really mean that?
I have that I've been a sergeant of sorts, either a sergeant or staff sergeant for, oh boy, since 2012. So about 10 years now I've been an NCO. So I've got that NCO voice sometimes where, I step into a situation. I know how to bark at people. I know how to deliver my voice at a long range. And whether it's in a soft tone or a long tone. And so like, I can absolutely respect that of like, I think everybody kind of has that capacity. When you get into the zone and you need to get the message across, you have this voice that kind of, it can be really undercutting for some people.
You're just emphasizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it emphasizes what you're saying or to the point you're trying to get across.
It's like, I am the authority. You better listen,
Exactly. Do it now.
Yeah.
It's yeah. It's funny. I'll say this too, in regard to communication. Like I told you a little bit ago, my wife and I are going to be celebrating. We've been together for 34 years. Our wedding anniversary is the September would be our 34th. We, dated for about 6 months before we got married. It was love at first sight, blah, 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 blah. She'll hear this and go, what is this blah, 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 blah stuff? I'll say, do you want it in the cop voice or the other voice? You don't stay together and go through what we've gone through without communication. And it had to be learned on both sides. And it had to be learned on my side. It had to be learned on my kid's side. There were times that, and you had mentioned something along the line earlier from what you did. We'd go to a doctor's appointment and they'd say, how you doing? I'd say, I'm doing great. How's the pain? I don't know, 1, 2. And we'd leave there and she'd say, why did you lie to the doctor? Because I was ingrained with, you don't show pain.
Yeah.
You don't show weakness. And it's not a masculinity thing. I spent 16 years on the job. Yeah. You can't show pain in the middle of something. You can't show weakness in the middle of something. You can't show, you know what I mean? So I'd walk out of there and she'd go, why'd you lie? Because my wife knew that I was in pain. My wife knew that it wasn't a 2. Just because of my actions, my voice, by the way I talked, she said there was anger, there was resentment in my voice, there was so many other things that she was able to detect from that conversation that said differently. And I had to learn to come out of the doctor's or go into the doctor's office with more of an honest conversation in order to help me improve my life and to help, so everything that we just talked about, you have the ability to create an effective and efficient conversation. And that sounds very technical, but in reality, when you stop and think, your conversation has to be effective. Your conversation has to be efficient in the regards that you have to go back to the compassion and the understanding and the patience and your vocabulary. And like you said earlier, the way you say something can be taken any way. It could be taken, you could offend somebody with just a few words. Mm-hmm. The old cliche that the pen is mightier than the sword. Words can cut deeper into somebody's heart than a sword can in some questions, and cut deep to the soul and stay there and fester and build. And so you need to be able to articulate what you want to say in a manner that allows you all to be human beings. And remember that you're a father, a son, a daughter, a wife, you're a brother, you're a sister, you're an uncle, you're an aunt. You're a human being, and that, just because you're having a bad day, somebody else may be having a worse day, and you guys hit a wall in between, and it doesn't help anybody in regard to that. You both need to, again, I like what you said, communicate. communication is a key factor in
Words
developing
matter.
healthy relationships and then improving and really growing from where you're coming from.
Yeah. Words matter. And
Words matter.
how you portray them, how you express them, they all matter. I'm curious, being married for 34 years, to be honest, is not common. So can you tell me, what are some of the things that your wife has done for you through all of these traumatic circumstances, difficult circumstances? What has she done for you through those things that allowed you to stay connected? Because not all marriages survive those things.
You're trying to make me cry, right?
I'm just trying to ask questions that I know bring value, and your emotion, quite frankly, is so important, so powerful. I absolutely respect it so much. So if you take as much time as you need to answer these questions.
I will tell you that over the last 34 years, the relationship with my wife we've had our ups and downs like everybody else. We've had the benefit of communication and talking. Same thing with my kids. My kids, we've developed from them from an early age that no matter what it is, no matter how angry you get, no matter what takes place, that you always have the opportunity to get it out, get your anger out, tell you what you want to say. And then once we calm down, we talk about it. And it didn't matter like I said to you earlier, if I offended you and I said something, I said, Dylan, tell me what offended you and let's talk about it. And we'll see if we can come around on that. I built my relationship with my wife that way. I built my relationship with my kids that way. My wife is a very strong woman. I can tell you that in the first 16 years of our marriage, before I got injured, life was normal. And, we had our little fights, we had our differences like everybody else does, but the communication was always open. And if there was something about it, it was important because of my job. And, I'd come home, I really wouldn't want to share a lot of my job with her and what happened during the daytime. There were a few times that I couldn't help myself. One Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, I worked both. I had 5 suicides. I had to investigate, and I had to knock on people's doors on Christmas and tell them that their loved one committed suicide. And that's a lot to hold in. That's a lot to crush down. I'd come home and my wife would say, I know that you don't want to talk about this, but I think you need to talk about this. And we would talk it out. Not all the gory details, not everything, but just the emotion, the feelings, the empathy, because I'm an empathetic person. I'm a compassionate person. And the fact that somebody had to take their life and then I had to knock on somebody's door. They're doing a Christmas party, and everybody's having a good time, and they're saying, "Oh, man, Merry Christmas," and then you got to say, "Can I talk to you outside?" It leaves a mark.
Yeah.
So, I would tell you that over that 34 years, part of our success is communication. So we never went to bed angry. I know that sounds very 1950-ish. But being a domestic violence investigator as well for 4 years, head of a task force, actually, that's all we did. The one thing I learned is communication, as we said earlier, and we kept that throughout our marriage. My wife became a caretaker for me. I had to at one time it became overwhelming for her. And she said, I married you because you promised you were going to take care of me, and now I'm having to take care of you. because I forgot to acknowledge the fact that she became my caretaker. She became the one that had to walk me to the bathroom. She became the one that had to help me get dressed. She had the one She became the one that had to pull my legs off the bed, put them on the floor, put my pants on, button my pants. She's the one that had to help me with the shower, wash my hair, comb my hair. She's the one that had to put up with the anger and the depression and the I don't want to be here anymore. And the I don't want to be a burden. But she reminded me why we got married. She reminded me that although during this time period, especially the last 20 years of this journey through each and every operation, that I was still a husband. I was just changed. I'm still a father. I've just changed. A lot of love, a lot of understanding, a lot of patience. A lot of conversations. Because I can absolutely tell you that there have been many times that I said, I just don't want to do this anymore. She is a wonderful person. A brilliant human being. And my daughters have done the same. They have reminded me every day that I am important. And that although I'm not the person I used to be, I'm a new person. And that I do have purpose. And that I do have value. I have tried to make it a point during this time period, especially the last 20 years, more importantly, the last 10, to recognize the fact that my wife is not just a caretaker. My wife is a human being. My wife is a woman. My wife is my partner, my spouse, my best friend. Recognizing that and not treating her like a caretaker has strengthened our relationship. It's allowed us to build a foundation and continue to build upon that love, understanding, and communication can overcome many, many things, including life-changing circumstances. So that's how my wife and I have stayed together for 34 years. And my kids have never treated me like I have a disability because I still have issues. My kids have patience. My daughters have understanding. My daughters help me without making me feel like I need the help. They support me when I need it and when I don't need it. I'm taking this slow. I'm sorry. My wife and my daughters have re-emphasized that family is the most important thing in life.
Can I just say, there are few conversations that I can remember that are just so wholesome as this.
Thank you. That touches my soul. I appreciate that very much.
It is a beautiful thing. And I would never, I would never think to complain about how slow you took that. I think it was necessary for you to explain it as whatever speed you need to, because that's the kind of thing that people stay for. That's the kind of thing people need to hear, and they need to take the time to hear.
Well, that comes from my heart and my soul. Without my family, I would not be here.
I know. And I don't know what I don't know if this means anything to you coming from a 32-year-old kid, that hasn't been around as many blocks as you have, but I'm honored and I'm proud of you.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. It really does. Thank you.
It's definitely it's obviously a battle that I've been through, different circumstances, but all the same,
Our journeys, everybody has their own journey in life, and mine does not differ from yours, only certain circumstances that were involved in it.
Yeah.
You have overcome tragedy. You have overcome and triumphed through your lifetime and have come out on the other side in an extremely positive way. You continue to inspire and motivate other people. And I'm coming from an old guy. I'm proud of you, where you were and where you came from and where you're at right now. And I am honored to be on your podcast. This is a conversation that I sincerely appreciate, because I don't always get the opportunity to share with other people with regard to my journey and how much I value my wife and my children and those around me that have helped me through this journey. And brother, we're all in this together. I think that the universe puts people together for a reason. And I think that what you do and what I do is to help people understand that they can overcome, they can move forward, they can do it in a positive way, and they can still give back. And I sincerely, from my heart, I'm so honored to be on your show. I appreciate you and what you do.
Likewise. I don't think I I don't think I could, share it in any better way that you just did to you as well. I think it's, I think it's incredibly powerful when not just, you know, this goes for anyone, but specifically, I think it's so important for men to be able to get to this level of discussion, of expression, and the ability for, I think both of us have, you know, we've shared emotions here, and there's no disrespect, there's no shame, um, there's no guilt, there's no regret, I assume, because I think we both look at this from the same lens, from the same perspective, from the same place of really understanding how much it is, how valuable it is to really have these discussions. And for me, it's always been my goal. You know, I've really recognized this more recently. I think that when I started this journey, you know, and I would say I started this journey in March of 2015, right after I almost ended my life. The journey started with pushing back against the very nature of my greatest weakness, and that was expression. I was so very terrible at expressing myself, that I needed to learn how. I needed to start somewhere, and that's where I ultimately began. You know, I started by learning, how do other people do it? How have other people stepped into that journey? And now I've come to this point of here I am. Like I've done, you know, I've started this podcast, and now we're at episode 56. I literally talk about myself here. I express myself here. I help, you know, I sit with people while they express themselves, and I learn from so many people about how they do it. And this has been the greatest confirmation I've ever had in my life of why this is so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because people just need it.
100%.
They absolutely need it. It's so important to be able to recognize how important interdependence is. It's not codependency. It's not hyper independence. It's looking at each other and saying, I'm going to need you at some point. I don't know when, I don't know why, but I'm going to need it. Right. And I'm also going to respect this piece of you, that you are still human, and that you're not going to be able to be there exactly how I need you to be. But all I need you to do is be there in some capacity. And that, you know, you can't build that with everybody, but you can build that with certain people, right, in small doses. And I think the more you do that, right, I think I've been able to do that with everybody that's been on my podcast. I try to build this understanding that I am honored to hear everything that you have to tell me, because I would hope that you would do the same for me. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said a few minutes ago, you know, we are similar because we've had journeys that not everybody has taken. And because of that, we have a brotherhood, a sisterhood, you know, it for the women out there, it is a journey that has allowed us to grow from, to expand from, to continue to interact with. And I think, I'm trying to think, I just had a conversation with a guy that has this absolutely fantastic organization for helping veterans and law enforcement and firefighters. They have a facility down in Texas. Like you said, we all have been on the same journey, just different circumstances. And because of that, it creates family. And everybody that's been on this walk, we're family, Dylan, because we've all been down that road. We've all been having to push forward, how to move, overcome, get the PTSD, the depression, the anger, the on the verge of I don't want to do this anymore, and have climbed out of that. That creates a community that we can rely on each other without fear of humility or degradation. You know, it's a community that we have an understanding and a compassion and an empathy for,
It's safe.
and safe. It's a safe environment. It's a safe haven for us. So yes, if you need anything from me, I'm always here. It's just a phone call away or an email away. And I've said that before, and I'll say it again. And I mean that with you. You know, you have, it's just a phone call away. It's that simple.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I just, again, it comes back, it brings me back to this, you know, of looking through my own journey and seeing just like how I got here. You know, I see just this dramatically different human being that I was, you know, 7 years ago, just 7 years ago. 7 years isn't that much to me. You know, it just doesn't feel like it that much. And here I am, like in this place where on camera in front of people, you know, I'm knowingly going to put this out someday. I'm going to post this for the internet and the world to see. It's never going to go away. I cry in front of people. I share in front of people. I expose and express in front of people, right? Like that never would have happened 7 years ago and before, right? And it's not even about the crying. It's just this ability to talk about the things that I've talked about in the past, and this ability to, you know, I saw this video of Dave Chappelle talking about how his mother, you know, something his mother said always stuck with him, and what she had said to him is that sometimes you need to be a lion to become the lamb you really are. And that captures so much, I think, what every human kind of needs to be is like, you need to be just strong enough to protect yourself, to be as soft as you want to be, right? And I love that in regards to family, of like, I need to be a protective father, but I don't need to look at my son and say, you're not good enough, right? Because that doesn't help him. What helps him is being able to know that he has a father that he can come to with anything, not just some things, right? He doesn't need to come to me, the only thing he can come to me if I'm a hard father is, hey, you know, hey dad, this guy is trying to beat me up. Is that the only thing I'm good for if I'm a hard father? It just doesn't make sense. And so I really love this ability to, you know, because I have emotions doesn't mean I can't be hard. I can't be a warrior. I still am, still operate like that. And so do you. Like, that's the remarkable thing, is that you may have physical, a physical capacity that isn't what it was before. That doesn't take away from the fact that you have a warrior's mindset of how to move forward through adversity. Doesn't take it away.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's a fantastic observation, and I honestly appreciate it very much.
It's the truth.
Yeah, our children. I'm glad you brought that up with your son, because that's a great mentality to go into it with. Is to let him understand, because we as children, especially as boys, especially like I'm in my seventh. I'm what, 3 years into my 7th decade on this planet.
Now we don't know your age, though.
We don't know my age. We'll just say somewhere around there. I'm just a little bit older than you, Dylan. A little bit. Growing up, we as children, as boys, were always taught, you don't cry, you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't show emotion. And then while I'm in the military, you don't cry, you don't show emotion, don't be a wuss, kind of a thing. You then, as a cop, you can't cry, you can't, you don't show emotion. I can't tell you how many times that I went into, if somebody had to tell somebody, knock on their door, the suicide stuff, or knock on their door and say, I'm delivering a death notification to you. I'm sorry that your husband, your daughter, your son, your wife, whatever, was killed in an automobile accident. And when they broke down, just wanted to sit there and cry with them. But I couldn't. I had to be strong. So I got in the patrol car and do it where nobody could see me. See, allowing your emotion out. It's a learned technique as you're learning.
Yeah.
It's a learn. And I still haven't quite passed. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you. I still have not reached that pinnacle where there are times where we'd be watching something and my wife said, she'll look over and look at me. It's okay. You can cry. And I'm going, are you sure?
Okay.
Or I'll be there and she'll just casually reach over and hand me a tissue.
Yep.
So yeah, it's something I think we all have to recognize and learn that you could be a man, you can be a boy, and you can have emotion, and you're allowed to show it. And I think it makes us better individuals when we do show it and when we do express it. I think it allows us to, again, have more empathy and compassion for humanity. We can be human. We show people we're a human being. We're not a even in the animal world, they show compassion.
Yeah.
Even, and it's quick story. I was watching National Geographic a couple of weeks ago, and they had a thing on there about there was a leopard that jumped off, killed a baboon. And when it realized that the baboon was a mother and had a child, had a baby, that he walked away from it. And when he realized there were other animals, other predators that were closing in, he grabbed the child, the baby, the baboon, and took it up in the tree with it and kept it safe up there until the rest of the baboon pack showed up, and then let the baboon climb down the tree, or he left the tree so they could go up and get it. And it showed, even in the animal kingdom, the big badass leopard can show compassion in certain circumstances, and we should too. We should be able to also.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit. I love that, obviously true analogy, but I want to go back to the part where you were talking about, as boys, we're not allowed to cry, as soldiers, we're not allowed to cry, as police officers, we're not allowed to cry. What's interesting is, all of a sudden, at least this is my experience with like the military and kind of exiting things like deployments, there's almost this civilian expectation of, this is when you cry. And when you come home, when you step away from the job, when you're done doing this job, it's almost this night and day change. And the expectation is almost debilitating in some ways, of like, you just can't make that night and day change like that. And it becomes so difficult and so foreign. And so in some ways, like I've seen this many times, I've seen soldiers just completely disconnect from the people that would appreciate them feeling, allow them to feel, and have a safe place for them to feel, but they disconnect from it because it feels like a trick. It feels like danger. It feels like everything opposing the very thing that has kept them alive for so long. And that in itself is so much of a challenge for, especially our kind of, the nature of men, I think is a big one. But, to anyone that's in first responder, law enforcement, military, that kind of, mindset or scenario, it can be such a drastic transformation that it's not going to happen overnight, but it needs to be, I don't know if it's an organizational thing. I don't know if it's a family thing. I don't know if it's a personal thing. It's difficult. And there's a lot of things out there to help, but it really comes down to a choice of having the courage to allow yourself to step back into society, to step back into being supported and being helped and being emotional, for a change, because it's allowable. right?
I agree with that. And I think that, obviously in the professions that we are in and we're in, it creates hardened individuals
Yep.
and hardened individuals because, again, it helps you to survive
Yep.
in those scenarios. When
It's
you're
practical.
deployed, when a cop was out on the street, when firefighter, EMTs, you can't do your job if you're emotional. You can't survive. You can't function if you're emotional because that can get you killed, can get somebody hurt, get this kind of thing, get your partner killed, get your team killed or injured. So it takes a lot to come home, and then you again, like you said, you it's not a switch. You can't just shut it off when you come home. Turn it on when you go to work, shut it off when you come home, because that would create such a mental dilemma within your own mind that you may not understand when you're supposed to shut it off and when you're supposed to turn it on. And that creates a whole new set of problems. So, yes, and there are organizations I think that are out there that at least give you the opportunity to now talk. And if you're a warrior of any type, whether it be a soldier or a law enforcement, EMT, first responder, anything along that line, there are organizations now that are now present that you can go into that safe environment and you're allowed to be emotional. You're allowed to let it all out. You're allowed to, before it creates a mental health challenge, whether it be through alcohol or drugs or suicide, allows you to get it out within the same environment with the community, with your brothers and sisters that have gone through the same thing. And, and I would encourage people to, if you're going through this, or if you're having issues like this, or if you feel that you need to cry, but you can't cry in front of somebody, there are organizations that you can reach out to that can help. And you can find stuff on my podcast, beforeyougopodcast.com, on the website, beforeyoupodcast.com, as well as I'll make sure that you've got the information to put on, within your thing. And I'm sure you have some already that people can reach out to. I've talked to some wonderful people that have created a safe environment for warriors. It's called Warrior's Heart, actually. If you just look for Warrior's Heart, HEART, they've created a safe environment for you to come in so that you don't reach that level where it just shuts you down as a human being, and you don't want that to happen. Because even going to a regular therapist doesn't always work. Because the regular therapist, I went to a regular therapist to talk about life, and to be honest, they couldn't handle it because you start talking about certain situations and really getting deep into it so that you can let it all go, and they kind of go, I got to stop you right there, because they're not used to hearing that side of it. They're not used to hearing what happened in Afghanistan. They're not used to hearing what happened when you, on Christmas Eve, when you went to 5 different suicides. They don't want to hear about all that. You know what I mean? They're used to hearing a textbook section of what you're supposed to say. They're not used to that. So there are organizations that can help you overcome that and help you move forward in that. And I would highly recommend it. It took me a long time to come to that realization that emotions are okay and that you're allowed to cry, that you're allowed to feel, you're allowed to literally feel, and don't be ashamed to in front of the other people that are around you. So
it's necessary.
Well done, Dylan. Yeah. Well done. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you. And likewise to you. Because you're here now because you did it.
Thank you very much. It was a journey, but we're both here.
Yes, we are. I always love this. And I had another episode that I did yesterday that was just, I'm just fascinated by how many people I connect with and have these conversations with that I absolutely just fall in love with. Like I just meet so many incredible people. I know you have, the same kind of feelings of being a podcast host, of bringing people on and having these conversations. I love it. I hope it's great for other people, but this is, I don't care if no one listens to my podcast. This is so beneficial for me. It's so comforting and confirming and enjoyable. And it's just so wonderful for me that I do this so selfishly. I just love it. And I have no shame saying that, because I know it does help people, but I just love it so much that I need to say that.
Yeah, I can relate. I understand. I relate. Trust me, I 100% relate. It's kind of one of these things. I used to release twice a week. I'm going down to once a week because of everything. My journey over the
Yeah.
last year of what's going on. So I had to go down to once a week, and I miss talking twice a week. And wife said, "Yeah, but don't you enjoy just that little break?" And it's like, "Yeah, but I enjoy talking more."
Right. It's that balance, sometimes, I'm actually, so I post once a week, but I've been going like, I was at like 4, 5, 6 a week. And now I'm down to like, I can only do 2 a week. And I think I'm at some point, obviously I'm going to have a kid here soon. A little baby girl's coming in June.
Congratulations.
You know, she's going to probably force me to go down to once a week. And I am not opposed to that. I'm not at all opposed to that.
Back to what I said earlier, family's the most important thing, brother.
Yeah. And I can't wait to, I just, I look back at my journey and I see where I am now. And I am just astounded sometimes that, one, I survived some of the things I survived. Two, to go on to that, I'm surprised I survived myself sometimes, but I did. And I'm so astounded as to where I've come since surviving myself. Of I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be a father. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be a husband, let alone a father. And I find myself in just a remarkable situation of, and that's not even looking at like the book that I've written, the content that I've built up and impacted so many people, the podcast, everything that I've done. I can't wrap my head around how I made it to becoming a father. And that is just I think that's the most profound thing that, that makes me emotional so more often than not. It's such a beautiful thing. And I take time a lot to just sit back and enjoy that.
I'm glad that you can recognize that and feel that. It's being a father is like the best job in the world.
Yeah.
Being a husband is the best job in the world too. So when my wife listens to this, honey, but it is family. Family is valuable, and I think that your journey, you found your new purpose. I told you I'm a keynote speaker. One of my things is podcasting with a purpose. One of my presentations is podcasting with a purpose. And you absolutely podcast with a purpose. You have purpose in your life that allows other people to be inspired, motivated, and educated. It allows them to feel like we did earlier. It allows them to recognize where they're at in life and what they can do to kind of move themselves forward. So you have a brilliant new purpose that you've put in order to help yourself and others move forward in a positive way, and can't get better than that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you so far. If that ever changes, I'll let you know. I'm still young, but I doubt it.
Well, yeah, hopefully I'll be around for a while. Though it's this gray hair keeps showing up. It's not bad, but
you look great.
I have to say that's if my brother listens to this, I got to tell him I still have hair, bro. He's losing his. I still have mine.
There you go. Well, Michael, I'm sure we could just continue to talk for a couple hours, but I have things to do. I'm sure you have things to do. So let's wrap this up with our final question. Again, you've had so much to say and so many profound things to say. I'm going to be surprised at what you say here, but the question is, if there was one message you could leave the world, what would it be?
I would say that always, each and every day, remember that there's always one more thing that you can say or that you can do to make somebody's life better. To say what you want to say or do what you want to do to make your environment a much better, positive environment or somebody else's life much better. So, one more thing before you go, be sure to say what you want to say, do what you want to do, because life can change in an instant.
Profound. Obviously profound.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing everything you shared and being vulnerable and being emotional. I think it's incredible. It's an honor. I appreciate it. And if you're still listening, for those listeners out there and my audience out there, please go check out Michael's podcast. One more thing before you go. I think it's obviously, if you like this conversation, you'll like many of his conversations. So please go check that out. Is there any other place that people can look you up, find you, or is that the best place?
You can find me on beforeyougopodcast.com. It's one word, beforeyougopodcast.com. And I'm on every platform that's out there, your favorite listening platform, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Amazon, you name it, I'm on it. And just started a YouTube channel. So you can find all that information on beforeyougopodcast.com.
Perfect. Well, Michael, again, thank you. And everyone who's listening still, we'll catch you next time on the Dylan Experience.
Thanks, Dylan.
There it is.